What's up, guys? Welcome back to Rambler HQ. I started getting ahead of myself again and forgot to grab the camera, so luckily I didn't get too far and thought maybe I'd catch you guys up. So been busy in here making a bit of a mess. Show you around a little bit what's been going on. Not too much out of the ordinary, just a couple shop projects and then tinkering on the car. So stick around, because at the end I've got a giveaway to announce, so you won't want to miss that, especially if you're a Rambler person. So anyway, without further ado, I'll show you what we've got going on. One thing that's hopefully going to help out in the shop here quite a bit is I've gotten rid of the giant buzzing 400 watt each factory industrial lighting, whatever you want to call it, in favor of LED. I don't know how well that'll show on the camera, if you get glare, but anyway, hopefully you can kind of get an idea. I replaced 800 watts worth of lighting with about 100 watts worth of LED, and it's actually brighter in here, and wife ought to be a lot happier with the electric bill. So anyway, that's one of the projects. Also been working on adding some equipment. I don't have anything to show you yet, but sometime this week we've got a tubing bender coming in, another tubing notcher, and what else we have? The stand for the tubing bender, and a 90-degree vise, a couple other things. We went to Autorama, and Woodward Fab was there, and had their a lot of stuff set up, but they had some combination deals going on, and I'd been looking anyway at getting into some of that stuff, so they made a decent deal, so I went ahead and ordered, and it's coming in this week, so possibly tomorrow. Steering rack, like I said, got a little ahead of myself, started making some mounting pads, but that's about as far as I've gotten other than pulling the old rack. Plan is to go ahead and move the motor back forward a little bit. The reason it was so far back to begin with was because the steering rack was in the way and there's no way for the crank pulley to clear. So I'm going to bring it back forward, weld those tunnels shut. We're going to mount a crossmember here, and then we'll probably have to put some stanchions under the steering knuckles so we don't end up with bump steer. But that's the plan. Show you, old rack is out, and over here I'll show you how the tractor carburetor. Here's the new Pinto rack. So let's get started on that. Alright, I wanted to show you behind the tabs what I'm working with here. This is the factory Corvette Crossmember, but these holes were originally a brace that would go from the crossmember up to the frame rail. We're not using them, so this area is going to be perfect, I think. I'm going to sand the paint off of this, and we're going to weld the tabs there and then weld the crossmember in between. So you can see where I've marked and laid it out. I've actually went ahead, made a line on here. It's actually about 2 1/4 inches forward from the back edge. When I cut my 1 5/8" tubing on the angle I need to match this, I end up with about 2 inches of cheek cut dimension. So giving it 2 1/4 is going to allow me to weld all the way around it. Then I can weld as well all the way around this tab once I clean everything up and give us a good rigid mount. After that, we'll be using this kit from Chassis Engineering that clamps up, move things out of the way, fancy stickers. But here's the brackets. As you can see, they welded the tube, and then there's aluminum clamps that go onto the rack. Had a visitor. That's for later. But here's the clamps. So once these are welded onto the tube, these brackets go on and bolt on, and that's what clamps the rack in place. So it's kind of hard to do one-handed, but you get an idea. Oops, actually. Yeah, anyway, goes right around just like that. That's right, because there's a flat pad on the rack that mounts against that, and then this clamps over the top. So there's 2 of those. Here's the other one. And it's chassis engineering kit. I've not used it before, but it came highly recommended, so we'll try it out and see. Okay guys, so after a busy work week, I was able to finally get back out here and back on the project. So, as you saw, I got the crossmember tacked in place, and what you didn't see was I tacked up the mounts for the rack itself. We have run into a little bit of an issue, and let me shed a little more light here. See if you can see where the bellows are. That's the pivot point for the tie rod ends. Basically, they are crashing right into the cover over the lower control arm pivot. So that's obviously not going to work, as well as, we knew this was going to be an issue, but the tie rod end there's not enough clearance there, for the inner tie rod. So I'm going to have to tunnel that out like what we had done before for the Corvette steering rack. Not a big deal. That was expected. This wasn't expected, but not insurmountable, obviously. So what I'm doing is I made a couple of spacers out of 1x1 rectangular tubing, and I'm going to put those in between the rack and the mounts. That'll lift everything up out of the way, and like I said, we're going to do a tunnel here in the frame rail anyway, so that should get us back in shape. So in the meantime, I'm going to cut the tack welds. I've only got just a little small tack here holding this crossmember in place at the moment, one on each side, and I'm going to cut those, pop this back out, and then all the old brackets for the steering rack need to go away. They're just going to be in the way of everything. You can see there's one there, and then this one here. So I'll get rid of all of that. That'll open up this this whole K-member completely. So then we can start looking at bringing the engine forward when we get to that point, and there won't be anything in the way. So like I said, in the meantime, I'm going to get these cut out those other brackets, and put the spacers on, and work on getting the frame rails tunneled out. So get back to it. Alright, so we got the brackets all cut off. They're not finished ground, obviously. Like I said back in the early videos, if you saw them, when it's all said and done, I'm going to pull everything back apart, and the K-member is going to get completely ground and sandblasted and painted and everything else. So, but for right now, I got the brackets all cut off and just gave them kind of a quick hit with the flap wheel, so they wouldn't be in the way or sharp edges or whatever. So, also you can probably see I finish welded the crossmember for the steering. I just got it tacked back in place on the K-member. Little tip: when it's still hot, don't use your squeeze clamps to hold things in place. I welded the plastic, if you can see that there. It's got a nice little pattern that matches the steel. Anyway, so next step, got the rack just kind of setting back in place again so that I could figure out where the tie rod ends went. I took one of the factory Corvette tie rod ends off the rack, kind of see how things lined out. Set the tie rod end from the rack, the inner tie rod, in pretty much as close of an angle as I could eyeball it as to where it's going to hit the GM tie rod end. And one thing I was happy to see is, like I mentioned, I'm going to raise the rack an inch. That's going to just about line it up perfect, so I shouldn't need the stanchions that I was originally planning. I thought I was going to have to extend the tie rod end, put a stanchion in the steering knuckle and then attach the tie rod into that and maybe use like a heim joint or something. But I think this way I can use factory tie rod ends into the steering knuckle. Once I've cut out the tunnel in the frame and raised it up an inch, they're just about going to line up perfect. So probably what I'm going to do to get that extra reach right there, let's see, straighten the tire out a little better. We're 1.5 inches, something like that. What I'm thinking is maybe taking and cutting off a section of the factory inner tie rod and coupling it with the pinto rack. Probably what I'll have to do is cut back here a little ways, build a coupler, maybe some hex stock, something like that, and thread it to match. So that way I can pick up tie rod ends if I ever need them right off the factory or out of the part store and just replace them. It fits the steering knuckle just fine, no issues. I think ideally in the long run, running heim joints would probably be the best bet, but for right now this will get the job done quick and dirty. So like I said, I'll probably I might even take some round stock. I could probably put round stock, slide it over, weld it, drill it and tap it, and we'll be in good shape that way too. So I'm going to play around with a couple of different ideas, see what works best. But in the meantime, I'm going to make some tunnels in here. Basically, I think I'm just going to move straight back from the original tunnel I had. We'll close that back up tight, and I think be in good shape. It'll basically just be a duplicate of what we got, just kind of coming around here. Instead, do that on both sides, and that should give me the clearance I need to get that rack up in the air. So hopefully when this is all said and done, we'll be able to push the Rabbler out of here, get it out in the sunlight. I don't know if for Michigan we got another nice rare day of sun, so spring's coming. Push the car outside and blow the dust off here at some point. Just got to run some steering. You can see I got some U-joints came in. We'll get steering rods run back in there, and then it would be nice to be able to see this thing roll. So anyway, enough of my rambling about the Rambler, so I'm going to get back to work. Alright, let's talk about the steering for a minute here. This was my first idea on it. What I actually did was cut a bit off of the stock steering rack from the Corvette, and you'll see that's basically this threaded section right here, and that was the nut for it. And my thought on that was to be able to use stock tie rod ends. So what I did was, after cutting that off, I took a piece of 3/4 by half DOM, reamed it and pressed in the threaded rod portion that I'd cut off of the rack. My intention is to weld that. I was going to drill a hole and plug weld it, but you know, I decided to go a different way. So anyway, the reason I went the other way, or decided not to do that, was by the time we line everything up, just roughly, I was going to have to cut that collar down even quite a bit more. And by the time I did that, it doesn't leave a whole lot on there. You see, I can slide it off. The diameter doesn't really let me thread that, so I have no good adjustment. In order to set the alignment, once this is welded to the pinto rack, I would have to pop the tie rod end every time, give it a couple turns, put it back on, check the alignment, the whole works. And you know, the main way to alleviate that would have been to put another nut that matched the half 20 thread of the pinto rack on the end of this sleeve, but that shortens it even more. And then realistically, it's only being held by that nut. There's not much in here to do us any good. So scrapping that idea. So we get rid of that. And what I decided instead was I bought this tie rod end kit from, I think it's called S&W Race Cars. As you can see, it comes with a piece of DOM tubing. Looks like 1 inch, probably 3/4 ID. And I come with 4 of these tube ends and 2 basically rod ends. The tube ends, you get 2 of them that are right hand, 2 that are left hand. The left hand have the hex on them. Hopefully you can see that. And that's what you can put a wrench on to do your adjustment. So basically what that allows you to do is you cut your tie rod end sleeve out of this tubing, you weld in the 2 rod ends, or tube ends, I'm sorry, and then thread it onto the rack, and we would probably bush the steering knuckle because it's tapered right now, so we'll drill that out to 3/4 and have a bushing bringing it down to 1/2 inch. We'll use a grade 8 bolt and some spacers once we get the rack solidly mounted to get rid of the bump steer. Just basically we want to have the tie rod end running out straight. So in the end, I think that's going to allow us to have an adjustable tie rod end that doesn't require removing anything, and it'll take a lot of the slop out. And if we ever have to replace a tie rod end, it's, you know, $8 or so, as opposed to whatever a Corvette tie rod end costs these days. So anyway, that's where I'm at on this. So I'm going to get back to work on that, and we'll see where we end up. So wanted to show you, I got the other clearance tunnel put in. I've got to still fill in the old one. We're not going to be needing that obviously anymore, so I'll just come across that with some steel and close in the side and weld it up. We've got finish grinding, clean up, whatever to do. As you can see, this is the tube end that I talked about. That's the right hand thread that'll go on there, and it's going to come out to the steering knuckle. And what I did was drill out the steering knuckle to 3/4 of an inch. And I've got a piece of 3/4 inch DOM steel tubing that I'm going to press in there. It's 3/4 OD and 1/2 inch ID, and that will allow me to use the 1/2 inch bolts, the grade 8 of course. I'm sure someone will ask. Anyway, grade 8 bolts that will run to the rod ends that will form up the on the end of the tie rods. So we're getting really close. I'm sure I'll have to do some spacing in here, play with that a little bit. I've got a stack of spacers that came with the tie rod end kit. So I'm going to get these pressed in and work on coming up with an idea for length on this tie rod end. So I will be back in a minute. try this by working smarter, not harder. Alright, so it looks like I'm going to need about 1 inch worth of spacer, just based on rough eye line, getting the flange here kind of parallel with the body. I've got the tie rod, or the inner tie rod end off the pinto rack, parallel with the lower control arm, and rough measurements have got us about 1 inch difference. So I'll have to get longer bolts here for the spindles, along with some washers and things. And like I said, I've got a stack of spacers that came with the kit, so we can get this set up to where it's in line. I'm sure once everything is together, we're going to have to do some adjustment once we get it on the road, get the alignment. I haven't fully set the caster angle. It's close. I think I set it about 6 degrees if you watch the earlier videos, somewhere right in there, but that's going to affect this alignment here with the tie rods as well. So we'll get things at least so the car can steer, and then once we actually get it on the road, start doing some testing, we'll play with it a little bit more and adjust it out for bump steer. So in the meantime, I've got to get some longer bolts for that, and when I do, we'll get the tie rod ends made. Well, I haven't made it to the hardware store yet, but I did dig some bolts out of the bolt bucket just to be able to try some things out. I got the tie rod end sleeves cut, so I'll show you that now. Change things up a little bit, but here I'll show you what I'm talking about. There's the tie rod sleeve. Works out great. It's like I said, you got left-hand threads, right-hand threads, so it's still got to be, obviously it's got to be TIG welded. It's just pressed together right now, but as you adjust it, it moves the steering knuckle in and out for setting the alignment. So right now it's loose, so it's not going to go anywhere. But I decided to do something a little different. I'm going to press this bushing back out that I put in there. On the other side, I'll show you what I did. I cut just a longer bushing and pressed it in all at once, so I don't need quite as much for spacers. And plus that basically will add some more rigidity to that bolt there. Beyond that, I think we're going to call it the end of this video. Duck underneath there. And just so we don't get too much longer on things, I'm going to get those tie rods, the ends there TIG welded, and pick up some more 3/4 inch tubing for the steering shaft. and maybe tomorrow we'll start the next video with getting steering shaft right up there, and maybe hanging the steering wheel and U-joints and getting all that set up. So I will see you next time. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share the video. I mentioned earlier that we're going to do some giveaways. I don't have a picture to show you right now, but we do have a t-shirt design in the works. The design is actually ready. We're waiting for the screen printer to get those done. So as soon as he does, I'm going to do a giveaway on that. Once we reach 100 subscribers, I will post the details on that giveaway, and hopefully in the next video I'll have a picture of the shirt for you with all that information. So in the meantime, I will see you next time, and thanks for coming to Because Rattler.